How do we bear that which is unbearable? How do we suffer that which is insufferable? How do we endure that which is endurable? Early grief feels wild, primitive, nonlinear, and crazed. It commands our assent and our attention. It uses up all the oxygen in the room. It erupts unpredictably. Our minds replay grief-related content in habitual cycles. It feels inescapable and lasts for much longer than other people. The non-bereaved think it should. Like an open, bleeding wound, it begs our tending. I am here, grief says. Be careful with me. Stop, pause, stay with me. So welcome to this grief and gratitude workshop. That opening quote was from Bearing the Unbearable, Love, Loss, and the Heartbreaking Path of Grief by Dr. Joanne Cacciatore. And I'll be using a few other quotes from this book today. It's a real gem. So here we are. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for engaging with this really important work. We're going to go nice and slow. We're going to take a lot of pauses and breaths. Grab a journal, paper, something to write with, some tea, something to drink, some way to hydrate while we move our way through a little bit of teaching, a little bit of journaling. Feel free to stop this at any time, pause, go back, rewatch, take care of yourself. And so why grief and gratitude? These two aspects of being human really go hand in hand and can really be two sides of the same coin in many ways. And the more that we grow our capacity for being in authentic gratitude and appreciation for life, the more we actually can normalize and appreciate and expand our capacity for being with grief as a normal human experience and as a way in which it actually, our grieving honors our loving, and our grief, the depths of our grief often can match the depths of our love. And so today, my intention with this workshop is just to explore these topics, is just to see, get you kind of interested, engaged, curious around the way in which your grieving practice, hopefully you'll feel inspired to have one at the end of this workshop, but that your grieving practice and your gratitude practice go hand in hand and become a part of your daily routine in honor of your life. And so just pausing for a minute, placing your hand on your heart or your belly or your thighs or your shoulders, just a place in your body that might need a little bit of space, a little bit of attention, a little bit of care. And just bring yourself into the circle that we're creating here, even through the recording. And grab your journal, think about something you are currently grieving and something you are grateful for. And so we'll take a minute here to journal. I will do some music in between journaling so that you have some time to process. And if you finish journaling, you may bring yourself back into a meditation, a moving meditation. Feel free to breathe, stretch, whatever you need throughout this whole time. So writing down, just taking about a minute here, something you're honoring that you're grieving, you're coming to this, honoring the grief of, and something that you're grateful for. just pausing, pulsing a little bit here with what we're coming in with. The first teaching I want to name here is that one thing that's important to remember is that grief spirals. And so we may have something that happens in our life that we feel grief around, and then we might notice in that same time frame that other grief, other types of grief from other parts of our life starts to come up, maybe through our dreams, maybe through when we go for a walk, or maybe even we feel a little bit agitated and we're not sure why, like we should be over this other thing. But it's important to know that grief spirals and that it intersects, and that it one grief can unravel another or another or another. And so think of the ways maybe that you have a core grief or something maybe that's happened, and maybe see if in your life, has there ever been a time when you had other griefs that were connected or that spiraled together. And so in your journal, please do write out your grief spiral and maybe name some things that have happened that feel connected, or feel as if they're, connected is the best word in some way. And of course, because this is grief and gratitude, we also have our gratitudes also spiral. And so on that same page with the grief spiral and the connection, you can also have a gratitude spiral and notice, like I'm noticing right now, it's so cozy in this room. It's making me feel so grateful to be here and to be sharing this with you. I'm noticing the color. You can't see this, but there's this beautiful picture of my grandmother's hands right behind the screen, and there's a moon, and it's a rainy day, and I can see the tree, and it's as if like the gratitude for this present moment of sitting here is spiraling out in the way in which I feel connected to nature and my grandmother and the moon, and that is a gratitude spiral. So let's take another minute here and go ahead in your journal and write out, even if you haven't been able to name in your own life a grief spiral or a gratitude spiral, just put them in your journal. So when you go back or contemplate, or if anything should come up in the next few weeks, then you've got it to land right there in your journal. We'll take another minute here. Okay, hopefully you got something on the page. So now I want to move to this brainstorm list of types of grief. This is not comprehensive. This is just a brainstorm list to get you thinking about your own life and all of the types of grief that you might have experienced. So the first thing I want to say about introducing this types of grief is that the intention of doing this is to really normalize grief as part of humanity. I know you probably can't read this, but to really normalize that this is part of being human, grief and grieving. And it's a part that's been so distant and cut off, and we've been so death averse and death phobic and grief phobic, that we really have taken out normalizing grief as part of common human experience. And one of the intentions of doing this grief brainstorm is to normalize and share our common human experiences, not because there's something wrong with us, but because in fact, it's what connects us. So one type of grief that we came up with, I did this workshop live, and so this is a list from that workshop of brainstorming types of grief: death of a loved being, pet, animal, place, that kind of thing; end of relationship; society falling apart; a phase of our life; institutions not having integrity. Some of us have grief around that; changes of circumstances; grief around regret, a diagnosis; loss of faith or loss of hope; grief around failed projects or something not being successful; and grief around paths not taken or lives not lived. And so just taking a moment here with these types of grief. So in your journal, maybe jot down, what types of grief have you experienced? Death, sadness, hopelessness, end of a relationship, a friendship, a stage of life. So let's take a minute here and just have you jot down in your own life, what kinds of grief have you experienced? What kind of grief are you thinking about? What are all the types of grief that you might experience or a loved one? We'll take a minute or so here.
There is a house built out of stone, wooden floors, walls, and window sills, tables and chairs warmed by all of the dust. This is a place where I don't feel alone. This is a place where I feel at home.
Let's take another few seconds here. Imagine the feeling of relief that would flood our whole being if we knew that when we were in the grip of sorrow or illness, our village would respond to our need. This would not be out of pity, but out of a realization that every one of us will take our turn at being ill and we will need one another. The Indigenous thought is, when one of us is ill, all of us are ill. Taking this thought a little further, we see that healing is a matter in great part of having our connections to the community and the cosmos restored. This truth has been acknowledged in many studies. Our immune response is strengthened when we feel our connection with community. By regularly renewing the bonds of belonging, we support our ability to remain healthy and whole. And that's from Francis Weller's The Wild Edge of Sorrow, a really beautiful book, a really beautiful book. And so there in that quote, you can really switch out the word ill for grief, for loss of friendship, loss of a pet, loss of a job, loss of a relationship, loss of a path. Like, imagine if community just supported us in all of the loss, right? Imagine if we were circled and held by the village, and how that might transform our relationship to self and other and life. Okay. Go ahead and take out that journal again, and to balance the grief practice, the grief naming that we just did, we're going to do a little bit of a rampage of appreciation. And so for this practice, you're going to write and write and write, fast and flowy, whatever comes out. What are you grateful for? What do you appreciate in your life in this moment? And there's no right or wrong, just let it flow out. And we'll take time here to do that. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Just letting that rampage of appreciation come out and spill out onto the page for this 3 minutes. What are all the things you're grateful for? What do you appreciate in your life? Keep going. If you feel stuck or stop, just start again at something new. It can be the smallest thing. Let it spiral out and out and out. Start to wind down your appreciation practice here, your rampage of gratitude. And savoring the sweetness. And just pausing and breathing in your own body. Landing in the room, the space you're in, look around, see what's around you. Grief is praise of those we have lost. Our own souls who have loved and are now heartbroken would turn to stone and hate us if we did not show such praise when we lose whom we love. A non-fake grieving is how we praise the dead, by praising that which has left us feeling cold and left behind. By the event of our uncontrolled grief, wail, and rap, we are also simultaneously praising with all our hearts the life we have been awarded to live, the life that gives us the health and opportunity of having lived fully enough to love deep enough to feel the loss we now grieve. To not grieve is a violence to the divine in our own hearts, and especially to the dead. If we do not grieve what we miss, we are not praising what we love. We are not praising the life we have been given in order to love. If we do not praise whom we miss, we ourselves in some ways are dead. So grief and praise make us alive. By Martin Pretchel. Grief and praise. I'm just going to pause and co-regulate for a minute. I'm just going to put my hand up. If you want to put one hand to your heart and one hand up, we'll just co-regulate here for a minute. Breathing together, stabilizing together, slowing down together. And if it would feel good, you can either stay like this, or if it feel good, you can bring both hands to your heart and imagine that we are sitting back to back, and we're just going to lean back into one another for a minute and support one another. Even talking about grief this much can bring up things that are right under the surface. And so we just want to keep titrating between this present moment and the grief we're talking about and the gratitude we're talking about, and kind of just go in and out of them. And so one of the regulation practices that I love is just to be back to back with a support, with a steady, regulated human, even in the imaginal realm and the meditative space. If it feels good to you, just lean back into my back. And I'm giving a little bit of pressure there so you feel supported as well. Thank you. So go ahead and grab your journal. And I'm going to talk for a minute about our last poster, which is creative grief practices. So I want to frame this today in the idea that you can practice grief. You can do that really intentionally, and that can be a part of your life through all stages of your life. And that you can create practices that are most nourishing and helpful and supportive for and to you. And so some of the creative grief practices that we came up with, again, this is a brainstorm list, so feel free to jot down those that you're interested in or create your own. But creating something in honor of. So for example, creating a collage or scrapbook. I have this very large picture of my grandmother's hands from right before she transitioned this summer, and creating that, choosing the picture and how I wanted it framed and where I wanted it to be is definitely a creative grief practice and just a deep honoring of her memory. And her memory is a blessing. And so looking at the hands, it really reminds me of how I want to live and be in the world using my hands that are on top of hers in this picture. And so there's symbol, there's meaning, and it's unique and special just between us. Well, I just shared it with you, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's something that I did because it just feels so good to honor her. A mourner's prayer. We have one in Judaism. You can look them up if there's one that really aligns with you, and say it daily as a practice for all who are grieving. You know, for example, this past week, we had a number of really horrific shootings in our country, and saying a mourner's prayer or a daily prayer of grief and gratitude for the mourning and for the grieving can be really powerful and helpful in our own life. Creating playlists. That's one of my love languages, is creating playlists. I've created a joy and grief for today, and I'll link that in here so you can have that playlist, but creating music that you can move to or walk to, or do art with or cook with, but something that really is meaningful to you. Creating some sort of a legacy project. Maybe there's a book they wanted to write, or an interview you had of them and you want to put it up on SoundCloud or something. Like, what kind of way could you honor the beloved dead? And more than that, can also be a friend, or even if the grief is not around somebody who died, it's around a life. How could you honor that in some way, through collage, through art, through something, create a poem, a dance, a song, through something creative. Yarn walk. I can't remember, someone suggested this in the group. That was a practice that they had. Lighting candles, ringing a bell, making food in honor of the beloved, like a silent supper. Planting anything, planting a garden, trees, flowers, dance, poem, art, collage. Doing on purpose memory practices can be really powerful. And one other one is intentionally watching or listening to something sad. And so for those who feel as if touching into some core grief that you may have that's not digested would not be good for you, meaning it would feel too overwhelming, you can intentionally watch a sad film or listen to something sad, whether it's music or a podcast or an audiobook, and allow yourself to feel the emotions. That way it's not so close to you and your own story, but it's still allowing you to touch in to the grief. So that can be really powerful. So now that I just named some creative grief practices, what are some that you're thinking of? What are some that you might want to do? And just taking a minute here to jot those down. And just seeing yourself eat too, maybe visualize yourself painting something or writing something, putting something together.
Dance around in your smoke and flicker out. Nothing like I used to know. Don't believe in safety nets. Strong love, make it alright to let go. You gotta hold on. Oh, slip, 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 slip.
We're going to stick with the journaling here. I'm going to give some prompts, see what comes up for you. The grief, or a grief that I want to work with, or I'm interested in working with, is. And so jotting down, maybe some things have come up today that you realize, oh, this is something I want to work through. I want to spend some time on. So let's just write that down. The grief, a grief that I want to work with, or I'm interested in working with, is. Here are some complexities, nuances, challenges, or insights about this grief. And of course, you can pause this and write everything down, or you can just jot down the question and come back to it later. Here are some complexities, nuances, challenges, or insights about this grief. Some ways I attune to myself, my care, my heart, and my well-being are. Some ways I attune to myself, my care, my heart, and my well-being are. And this is really important because we're naming the complexities and nuances and challenges of a grief that we're working with. And we're also linking it to the ways in which we have deep self-care that turns into community care or collective care, but that we're staying in the energies or the energetics of I matter, our bodies matter, that our gratitude matters, and it spirals out and opens and widens. It expands our capacity for healing, for care, and for a more just world. It helps us see more clearly, not through a trauma lens or a grief lens or a trance or a cloudy. It's like, okay, I am clear enough to see this is this grief. This is the way in which I can care for myself. And these other things that may be happening in the world, I'm able to do the next right step or what's needed because I've been caring to and attending to my own emotional body. So I want to make sure that we understand the way in which grief and gratitude are connected to our own healing path, to our own spiral of not causing more harm in the world. And that a lot of what we're seeing with so much pain in the physical body and the emotional body in so many humans is because this kind of work of grief and gratitude, processing, digesting, metabolizing, it has not been prioritized. And so we're uplifting and bringing this to the light as a way in which saying, I really honor life. I really believe deeply in humanity and that we need each other and we can come together. And I have my own responsibility to work through this grief that has come to me and come to all of us. And it's helping enhance my life. Next question. Looking towards the months ahead or the memories in the past, I can find a little bit of gratitude for. So in this one, you have a choice to either look ahead and think about some things that are coming up that you're feeling grateful for, or thinking about some memories of the past and finding that gratitude for. And I look at that picture of my grandmother's hands and I am just flooded with memories of the past and so much gratitude for being in relationship with her, in this close relationship with her, for all the gifts of being in relationship with her and all the shenanigans that we had. So where is that little bit of gratitude in your life? And the last question here is, what is good grief? What is good grief? What does that mean to you? What might that look like? What might that feel like? There are two kinds of suffering. The suffering we run from because we are unwilling to face the truth of life, and the suffering that comes when we're willing to stop running from the sorrows and difficulties of the world. The second kind of suffering will lead you to freedom. And so thinking about freedom in your gratitude practice, in your grief practice, we do not experience grief without love, and we cannot experience love without grief. And so seeing them as interconnected, seeing them as one being because of the other, this grief and love, this gratitude and joy with grief and sorrow and honoring. And I want to close today. So we went over a little bit of theory, a little bit of how to bring some practices into your life, some journaling questions for you. some quotes, hopefully to inspire deeper ways of thinking about grief and gratitude, some practices you can return to, rampage of appreciation, spirals of grief, spirals of gratitude. And I'm going to link in this the playlist that you can go back to. And so I'm going to close with a question and then a song. And for the song, I really invite you to move your body. So in most wisdom traditions and indigenous practices, when the community or the circle would come around the fire for wailing, for mourning, for grieving, at the end of the physical expression, the shaking, yelling, just primal sounds would come out. And then there would be some movement, there would be some drumming, there would be some dancing. And so given what we've done in this short time together, I still want to make sure to include that movement, this movement practice, as a deep honoring of our grief practice. And so we'll close with a song today. Okay. So my closing question for you, just to think about, you can put it in your journal or just hold it in your heart. I'm leaving today, or I'm closing today, feeling, thinking, knowing, or wondering. I'm leaving today, feeling, thinking, knowing, or wondering. Thank you all for being here for this mini workshop. It's been really an honor to even put this together and have people interested in wanting to do this work. Please, please reach out if you want any more support or resources or want to stay in touch around this work. Right now, I'm in the process of creating a good grief workshop for later this winter and early spring, using the wild edge of sorrow and bearing the unbearable. And if you'd like more information on that or to join us, just reach out. Be well, and let's move together. Just move intuitively, whatever feels good to you. You don't have to do what I'm doing.
Sitting here, looking out at the sea, I ask you, brother, how can this be? Did you hear? Did you see? Did you know? Always that this is the time that you go. Sitting here, looking out at the sea, I ask you, brother, how can this be? Did you hear? Did you know? receive your love.